Good morning, everybody. It's Bernard Nomberg. It's Tuesday morning, a little bit after 10 a.m. Central, and it's time for our weekly NOMBERG Law Live. I have interesting conversations every week with people in their areas of expertise, and I cannot tell you how excited I am to have my guest today, former judge, former attorney. I guess you're always an attorney, even though she's retired. Judge Caryl Privett is my guest today. Judge, thank you so much for making some time, and I'm really looking forward to us catching up a little bit.
Well, but it's good to see you, and it's great to talk to folks, and it's wonderful to be retired.
Well, I bet that it is. For those of you who don't know Judge Privett, she had a 40-plus year career in legal, all different levels, private practice. She was the first woman U.S. attorney in Alabama, and she was on the bench circuit court in Jefferson County, which is Birmingham, for about 15 years, I believe, before you retired. And Judge, I know, say that again? 12 years. Gotcha. And I had the honor and privilege of being in front of Judge Privett for many of my cases back in the day. And one of the things that have always had a bond with Judge is our undergraduate is the same school, Vanderbilt University. And that's where we're going to head a little bit today. But Judge, I want to, before we jump into the black and gold and Nashville and campus, tell us about retirement. How fun is that for you? Because I bet you're busier now than you've probably been in your life in a long time.
Well, actually, I find that I've got more time to read. Mm-hmm. I do a lot of needlepoint. I stitch tons of needlepoint. That's become my hobby. I used to do photography, but I started having vision problems with my cameras that I don't have when I'm doing needlepoint because I can use a magnifier. So I don't do photography anymore. I do a lot of needlepoint, and I'm doing things, volunteering things with the Presbyterian Church that sometimes it keeps me very busy, and sometimes it's a little more relaxed, but it's always rewarding.
Well, another thing that I know that you so enjoy.
I can't hear you.
You can't? Are we on a delay? Are you able to hear me now, Judge?
No, I said you were back.
Okay. I know that one of the things we cannot
but you're a little bit delayed.
Is how the internet works. But I want to talk about your love of Vanderbilt. How did you end up going there for undergraduate to Vanderbilt University in Nashville? Oh, Judge, I think
I went to visit campuses like so many juniors in high school do. Mm-hmm. Are you getting a delay on me too?
I can hear you just fine, Judge.
Oh, well, we'll do the best we can.
Yeah.
I visited. Okay, well, I visited the campus when I was a junior and fell in love. Mm-hmm. And that was it. And it was probably one of the best decisions I ever made in my life was to go to Vanderbilt. It was the right place for me at the right time.
And when you got up to Vanderbilt and you saw the campus, and I assume there were classes or organizations that really appealed to you once you got up there. What did you end up majoring in? What did you do during your undergraduate years that brought you some joy?
Okay. First of all, I was a political science major from the beginning. I knew that's what I wanted to do. And I had been the editor of my high school paper, and I joined the Vanderbilt Hustler, which is our newspaper. I love the name. And I worked on the newspaper all 4 years, rising to managing editor, not editor-in-chief, but just below editor-in-chief. I was managing editor, and had made some wonderful friendships that are still my friends today.
Well, Judge, you were at school during a very turbulent time in U.S. history, late 60s, early 70s. Did the Vanderbilt campus, was it impacted with student either protests or riots or issues that went on that were part of the bigger picture of society?
Absolutely. And it was the perfect place to be during that time, because it was relatively safe being in the South, but it was also a place where inquiry was encouraged, where differences were not frowned upon, differences in opinions. We had the support of the administration. Chancellor Alexander Hurd was a phenomenal human being. We had conservatives, and there was actually a conservative newspaper started in competition with the Hustler while I was there, because the Hustler, we tended to be a tad liberal. But it was a wonderful place to learn, and we learned not just in the classroom. We were able to learn from each other. Sitting around the Commodore room with a cocoa was as good a learning place as sitting in a classroom sometimes.
Judge, as long as I've known you, I know of your love of sport.
I'm having to read your lips.
That's okay.
Make the question short.
I know you love sports, and I know you love Vanderbilt sports. When you were at Vanderbilt, that was also during the time that the first African-American athletes played varsity sports. We had Perry Wallace and Taylor Stokes and so many others who followed them. During your undergraduate years, did you attend the sporting events? Were you friends with any of the pioneers who broke the color barriers for the sports teams?
Well, Perry Wallace was in my class and was an incredible person. I can't say I got to know him well, but I did get to know him. And we would see each other later in life, because I was an attorney assistant U.S. attorney in the U.S. Attorney's office here in Birmingham. Perry became a lawyer after playing a little basketball, and one of his initial jobs was in the lands division of the Department of Justice in Washington. So one day I ran into him in the hall when I was in Washington. And then after that, made a point to try and catch up with him when I was there. Didn't always, but from that point on, we sort of kept an eye on what each other was doing. We didn't really communicate that much, but then in later years when he came back to campus, and I saw him a few times then, and it was just a really privilege to know him, because he was an incredible human being. I have to say, but going back to your original question in terms of dealing with sports, when I was at Vanderbilt, as is now, football was not exactly our best sport. And I know you're a former football player, and that was not something that you would want to hear, but I sort of quit going to football games and even missed the incredible game my senior year when we beat Alabama. I was in the dorm listening, but I didn't make it to that game, and to my everlasting shame. When I was at Vanderbilt, baseball wasn't a big sport either. And I'm one of the few undergrads who actually went to a baseball game when I was there. But I've always loved baseball. And in recent years, with Tim Corbin as our coach, Vanderbilt baseball has been spectacular. The major sport when I was a student was basketball. And it was, of course, at that time, the freshmen played separately from varsity. So I would go to see freshman games to see Perry, Godfrey Dillard play. And then, followed that. And going to Memorial Gym was an incredibly fun experience. I was back in Memorial Gym Saturday night, and it's different. It is so different. I mean, it's all of this glamour and glitz and sound and neon and signs. And the one thing that hasn't changed is the benches that the Vanderbilt students sit on. It's those same hard wooden benches. And you see all the glitz in the rest of the stadium, and that one area, it hasn't changed.
Well, Saturday you saw a Vanderbilt baseball win, and then later in the same day, you got to go to Memorial to see a big win over Texas A&M. So that's a good sports day on the campus for you.
Actually, we won Friday night in baseball, lost Saturday and Sunday in baseball.
Yeah.
But one Saturday night in basketball. I was a tired cookie when it was all over with because I scream and yell and jump up and down. And when we're not doing well, I'm sitting back grumpy. And the seats have gotten more comfortable, I have to say, both in Hawkins Field and in Memorial Gym. The seats for other than for students are a lot more comfortable than they used to be. I'll just, as another aside, when I went to baseball games as an undergraduate, which wasn't that frequently, but there would maybe be a handful of us from the Hustler that would go. And we would be sitting on the grass in the outfield, beyond the outfield. There were just basically bleachers, and we got chased off. I was not there the infamous time my friends got chased off for having a six-pack and ended up in a little trouble. I happened to have missed that one, but had I been there, I'd have been a part of it.
Well, for someone who has sat with you at Vanderbilt baseball games and that Hoover met, I can attest to your fandom, that's for sure. Guys, I'm talking with retired Judge Caryl Privett, who happens to probably be one of Vanderbilt's biggest athletics and academic supporters. Judge, I want to talk about the difference from when you were an undergraduate, from when I was undergraduate a few years after you, to what I want to talk about is the atmosphere from a sports standpoint. Our current administration, they've pledged $100 million of the $300 million campaign to upgrade all the facilities. It seems an unprecedented thing that Chancellor Dearmeyer, working with our athletics director, Candace Lee, is undertaking. It's very exciting. And I don't recall there ever being as much support for athletics and the experience of student athletes at the school ever. Was it ever that much support during your years or subsequent years that you recall?
I really don't. Athletes were just students. They were, they had a really rough road to go because in addition to having to attend classes and having to make their grades, they also had to practice and then play out of town games, and particularly the basketball players were playing out of town in the middle of the week. It was, I don't remember them catching many breaks. I do think they may have had a tutor that helped with their academic work, but they were expected to make grades just like everybody else. Now, whether they got a little help on that, there was always a little rumors about it, but I really don't think it happened.
It certainly has been the Vanderbilt, I guess, the approach by the administration. Of course, academics comes first, then any other extracurricular activities from that standpoint. Judge, what is it that you enjoy about visiting campus now? There's so many changes, so many new buildings, always construction going on, reconfiguring parts of campus. But when you visited this past weekend and in recent times, what is it about visiting campus that you like, that gives you joy?
Well, this weekend, about all I saw was Hawkins Field and Memorial Gym and the parking deck. There's a parking deck right outside of the baseball field where there are people who can actually watch baseball games from the top row of the deck, and there were people there. But it's a pretty it's a lot prettier campus, frankly, now than it was when I was there. But it was I one time roaming around campus on a reunion weekend ran into the late professor and then when I was there, Dean Bob Burkby. And I said, the campus, it looks a whole lot better than it did when I was there. There were flowers and flower beds, and the grass was kept up, which was not true when I was an undergraduate. And he said, yeah, the plant operations people learned you have to water to make plants grow. And so, but the campus is, I think, a lot better kept. But the thing that is the most amazing is the incredible size of the new residence halls. I mean, they are amazing. And of course, when I was an undergraduate, Peabody was a separate college, and the merger of those 2 schools has doubled the size of the campus in essence. And So things are just a lot bigger. And when I was an undergraduate before the Surratt Center was built, and that I can get lost there. But but it's it's still a walkable campus. You feel like when you're on campus, you are a part of the city, but you're away from the city, and it can be a very peaceful place if you're not attacked by squirrels.
That's so true. That's so true. But behind the student center that leads directly out to each of the academic buildings, you would never know that you're in the middle of a major metropolitan area. And that's what I've always appreciated about the campus. Judge, how did your undergraduate years influence you or lead you to want to go to law school?
I didn't know what to do with a political science degree, and I didn't want to go to graduate school. And I sure didn't want to teach. So I had a couple of professors who encouraged me, as well as some friends from Birmingham who encouraged me to think about law school. Took the LSAT, applied to a bunch of law schools, got into two, picked the one that scared me the most, and went to NYU. Got as far away from home as I could possibly get. After 3 years in New York, home looked really good. So that was kind of how that happened.
Well, in the mid 70s, there weren't that many women who had broken into the law and become lawyers at that point. Did you feel any pressure? Did you feel any, heaviness on you to pave a path? Or did it just seem natural to you to just go into private practice with a law firm and start your career?
Well, I was a tad naive about this. I didn't understand that I was supposed to be different just because I was a woman, and I did learn it. But you should also understand that there was more of a pressure because I began practicing law with African American law firms, and I was doing civil rights law. So in addition to being a woman, I was doing something that was at that time very unpopular in terms of the legal profession. And so which I felt was a calling. I felt this was important. I wanted to come home to do what I thought was important. When I was growing up, I kept hearing all these aspersions cast on outside agitators. So I decided I wanted to be an inside agitator. And so I did for about 3 years. And then I went to the U.S. Attorney's Office and was going to stay there for a few years, which turned into 22. And ended up with being court appointed to the position of United States Attorney, which was an incredible honor and was a really an amazing job. I throughout my career, I've been aware of the responsibility of being a woman in what was traditionally a man's world, but it was not in the forefront of my mind that it was more important to me to be a good lawyer and to represent my clients. And Oscar Adams, who was the senior partner in the firm that I spent most of the time with when I was in private practice, taught me that the most important thing for a lawyer to do is represent your client. And that was an important lesson that I learned from him, and one I've never forgotten.
Judge, over the years, law school experiences have evolved. They've changed. There's so much more technology. There seems to be so much more pressure on the students. And it's been quite a while since I've been in school. It's been a while since you've been in school. But while you were on the bench for those 12 years, you saw baby lawyers.
Long while.
You saw baby lawyers, you saw experienced lawyers, and everybody in between. And I guess I would ask, as we're getting closer toward the end of our conversation, if you've got a young person who's interested in going into law these days, can you share, I guess, some of your words of wisdom, some experience with them about how do you get started as a young lawyer?
That's a really good question. I have a nephew who practices law in California, and I've sort of watched him as he decided to go to law school and then had difficulty getting his first job, and now doing quite well and married to another lawyer and going through all of that. And I think the most important thing for any young lawyer or for any lawyer to remember is that your word is your bond, and that is as long as you remember that you can lose your reputation very easily. It's very hard to get it back. And so that would be something that I would tell anyone aspiring to the practice of law, or anyone young practicing law, was to, yes, you represent your clients, but not to the point of losing who you are.
No one case or no one client should impact a lawyer's career to their detriment. That's for sure. Judge, I don't know if we're still on a delay or if you can hear me, but I want to thank you. I'm sorry we've had these delay or these internet difficulties.
We're on a real delay now.
Yeah.
It's gotten.
Well, Judge, I hope that you can hear me. I want to thank you for spending a few minutes with us today, sharing a little bit of your journey, your love of Vanderbilt and its sports programs and the law. So thank you for spending some time with us today. Guys, I want to thank you.
You're very welcome, Bernard.
Thank you. Guys, I want to thank you. I'm sorry for the delay in our internet connection, but we can't control that. Every Tuesday at 10 o'clock Central, NOMBERG Law Live, we have interesting conversations with people in their areas of expertise. We'll see you next week. Take care.